All right, Mr. Mayor, we're after 6 o'clock. You can start at your discretion. I think we're recording.
All right. Call this special meeting of Toledo City Council for January 13th, 2026 to order. Our first item is pledge allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, you take the roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Chambers.
Here.
Councilor Keating. Here. Councilor Burns is excused. Councilor Sylvia.
Yes, sir.
Councilor Kaufman.
Yes,
Madam President.
I am here.
And Mayor Crawford. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any visitors or public comment this evening? Anyone online?
There is someone online, but I don't know if they want to talk.
Please raise your hand if you would like to speak.
Anybody know the
I
Jeopardy?
see nothing.
All right.
Carry on.
Our next item is our only decision item. We have a request for council action, approval of change order number 3 for the Southeast Sturdivant Road Waterline Upsizing Project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll give a brief introduction, and then we have our subject matter experts on the topic here to speak as well this evening. So, council, as the mayor introduced, you have a motion before you this evening to requesting your approval to change order number 3 for the Southeast Sturdivant Road Waterline Upsizing Project at an amount to exceed, and as I'll explain in a moment, we're very hopeful doesn't reach $225,095.62. Quick background for you. You'll recall at a special meeting on September 24th, you as council approved a motion to direct Civil West Engineering Services, our city's contracted engineer of record, to proceed with awarding a bid for the road waterline project in question. That bid was awarded to Trenchline Excavation. They had a calculated low bid of $556,670.88. Contract was subsequently finalized with Trenchline. We agreed with them at the time that we would delay the start of the project until after the new year. By the time we contracted, it was close to the holidays, and let their staff enjoy the holiday season. So the project was set to get started here after the New Year's holiday had passed. So as I mentioned, we executed a contract with Civil West. The city has received a grant from Business Oregon of $640,000 that is dedicated toward this project. It was anticipated that grant would either substantially or fully cover not only the project cost, but Civil West's engineering and project management portion of the project. So one of the first tasks that a contractor does on a project like this is what they call potholing, where they drill test holes at different sites throughout the project area to determine the depth of the pavement that they would need to remove. So as I shared in an email earlier today, the standard depth of a local or residential street is usually 4 to 6 inches. What Trenchline discovered with their potholing is that the depth of Southeast Sturdivant Road in the project area is between 18 and 24 inches. They drilled 3 holes, one at either end of the project area and one at an intersection at roughly the midpoint of the project. The road was 24 inches at either end and around 18 inches at that midpoint. The assumption of public works staff and our engineers, this is a county road, as you're aware, and the assumption is that when they did grind and overlay projects, they probably, just as an example, ground off 2 inches and laid down 4. And over the years, that led to this much larger than anticipated depth of the pavement. So as I mentioned in the RCA, the standard size of a saw to cut into and remove pavement is 20 inches. That's the depth that the saw will go. And so in these areas where it's 24 inches, that's going to require some other type of work to remove that additional depth, jackhammering or other process work to complete the removal of that section. So when you're able to use a saw, there's not a significant difference in time, labor, and equipment for 4 inches as there would be 20. It's really when you exceed the 20 inches that really impacts the materials used, the manpower involved, and so forth. So the change order that was what you have in your packet this evening was what was submitted to the city by Trenchline as their anticipated worst case scenario pricing. It's based on the addition of 280 hours of manpower and equipment. They run 10-hour days. They're anticipating 14 days. The 280 hours obviously implies more than one person dedicated to the work. And so they proposed, as I mentioned here and have in writing, the worst case scenario. The hope of Civil West and Trenchline is that it really will be closer to 100,000 than 225. But what we wanted to do today, they've already lost 3 days of work. They had to stop Friday, Monday, and today. And this obviously by quite a number of exponents exceeds my authority. So we wanted to come to you this evening and ask for approval up to the worst case scenario pricing, so that we don't have to call another special meeting in case say we set it at 100,000 and then it exceeded that. We didn't want to have to come back and do this again. But I do want to emphasize on the record that the hope is that the final additional cost will be significantly less than we're asking for council authority. We had a question from a counselor this morning via email, a really great question. And that's, I'm glad it came in ahead of time so that I was able to ask Chris to be here this evening. The difference between the way the project was bid and the way the change order that you have in front of you is presented is that the contractor bid at a linear foot rate, expecting the standard depth of pavement. And so that linear foot rate included all of the work that would occur per linear foot, the removal of the asphalt, the removal of the existing water line, the placement of the new line, and the repaving of the road. So what you now have in front of you is the contractor's estimated hourly rate for manpower and equipment. So there isn't a perfect apples to apples comparison between how the project was bid and how you're being asked to approve an increased rate. So I did ask Chris Janigo from Civil West to be present with us this evening and answer any questions that you may have on how the change order and the pricing was put together and how it compares to the bid. I would just add lastly that in discussions with Mr. Lorimore, our Public Works Director, we've reviewed the city's road maintenance and water system capital outlay line items. We can use both of them since this is a project not only to repave a road, but also place a new water line. And both of those line items in the budget have substantial funds available to absorb the increased costs. So our recommendation from staff is that whatever the final cost ends up being, up to the amount we're asking you to authorize this evening, would be split equally between those two funds. So, Mr. Mayor, at this point, I myself, Mr. Lorimore, Mr. Janigo are available for any questions. I would also invite Chris to add anything that you may like to, but I'm happy to pause for questions at this point as well.
I had Andrew first.
So if I'm understanding correctly, we've got $640,000 in a grant from Business Oregon. So some of this difference would be or could be absorbed by that, if I'm not mistaken?
There's a potential there, Councillor Keating, as I mentioned a moment ago, in addition to the cost of the project work itself, there's also the cost for Civil West to manage the project. So I just want to emphasize, you're correct that some of the grant fund may be able to go to this. That will really depend on what the final project management costs end up being.
And do we have an estimate for what we roughly expect that to be?
We haven't at this point. One of the reasons for that is, as Chris and I were discussing earlier, by adding this additional work, Civil West is going to be on site to track how much is additional work as compared to what was covered by the original bid. So their total project management cost may increase a little bit as well, but I'm hoping that that will be offset by some cost savings on compared to the full bid. So we don't have a perfect estimate at this point. Chris, was there ever, to your knowledge, was there an initial estimate of what project management costs would have been?
For the construction, thank you, council, for having me today, Cristiano. We had an initial time allotment of about 40 grand that was for allocated for Civil West to manage for construction with a do not exceed amount at about 40. I'm not sure the exact number.
Okay. Round number 40,000, you're saying, which with the I'm going to round up because I like round numbers. So with a project cost of roughly 560,000 plus 40,000 initial estimate to Civil West, that gives us a round number of around 40,000 potentially still available in grant funds.
Those are the only questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
You were,
Well, I was going to ask, but you already answered where the money was going to come from. So essentially what you're saying is Civil West will be the watchdog over
Correct.
that, because coming from doing construction, I absolutely hate time and material jobs.
Yep.
Because that is where contractors can totally screw you, out of a lot of money because they can rack up whatever they want.
Yeah.
And the markup on product and everything is huge.
That was, to be very honest with you, if you look at page 2 of the cost estimate, that was one of the sticker shocks for Brian and I, was not just the estimated cost, but if you look at the totals box on page 2, you see that there's a percentage markup that's included.
That's what I was gonna ask. That was my other question. Why is there a markup of nearly $30,000 added onto all that labor and material and equipment?
And I'll let Chris speak to that specific question, Counselor. We had a real good discussion on that the first night, because when this first came across last Thursday evening, that was one of the sticker shocks for Brian and myself. So Chris, if you could kind of explain how the markups are accounted for in a project like this.
Yes, so we use our standard, it's called EJCDC standard contract, engineering joint contracting document committee, which is standard language for public works contracts with contractors. They have a force account process outlined in the front end of the contract, which allows for a 15% markup. Unfortunately, we did get sticker shock initially when this change order first was presenting to us. Initially we looked at different options. We looked at, can we put it in the shoulder of the road? Can we drill the line? Can we grind extra to get rid of this? And this approach, the saw cutting, kind of penciled out internally as the more affordable option. Now, of course, with, like you're saying, Councilor Sylvia, the T&M is a rough way to go about it, because what it's going to require is us out there with pretty much a stopwatch, counting, because the first 6 inches is going to be original contract, and under that, the asphalt under that is going to be the change time materials, and then you're getting back into unit price work. Hauling is all part of the initial contract, so just that portion in between of that additional asphalt is what we're going to be tracking and only permitting, and then coordinating with the contractor at the end of every day, making sure full transparency of what they're actually getting paid for is extra, and then trying to move forward as fast as possible and not, get in their way.
And that was one of the first questions that I asked Chris, Councilor Keating, Councilor Sylvia, my apologies. Is this 15%, is that standard for this type of project and this type of contract. And so when you mentioned a second ago, the specific acronym of the type of contract that's used, that was the answer, is that this is standard throughout the industry and the state. So that's one of the goals of why we're going to go T&M on this process, is the lower number of hours, then obviously the lower the markup, because it is all in units of hours. So you mentioned almost $30,000 in markup. That's all based on that 280 hours. So if it comes in closer to 100, then the total value will be less.
So one more question real quick before we move on. You were just talking about all the dumping of the asphalt. Seems how we have at least double the asphalt, is that going to change the dump piece? Because I don't see that in here anywhere either.
Looking at the difference in weight between, the asphalt or the aggregate that would have been underneath the asphalt, it's pretty minimal. It's pretty easy to argue that those charges would not be applicable to the change.
And no more charge for more hauling?
Yeah, and that's also hard to, it's hard to track as well, with our field representative on site. I don't think that will be applicable to the work change directive that we're.
I would also add that if they didn't include it in the documentation that they sent, then they don't get to spring it on us afterward. They put in here the things that they're going to bill us for. And so that was a great question, Councilor Sylvia, but that would be my response if they did try to increase that cost, is to say, well, you didn't include it in the change order that my council approved.
It just went back to all the years that I did construction, because I watched my boss screw people.
Yeah.
It was just ugly.
And that was one of the questions that I had for not only Chris Janigo, but Chris Stoddard, who's the CEO of Trenchline, is I really appreciate the explanation of the worst case scenario. But if I ask my council to authorize up to that amount, then how are we going to track and make sure that they don't just say, oh yeah, it came out to 225? And that's where we talked about having them on site with that stopwatch.
It's worth the extra money to have them on site.
Absolutely.
Council President Mix.
Okay. I'm gonna be a little mean here. When you ask if it's standard practice, you don't ask the company that's charging you.
Oh, I didn't ask them. I asked him.
Well, he's not who you ask. You ask another company who isn't charging you that. But besides that, my question is this. So is Trenchline Excavation a subcontractor of Civil West Engineering?
No, they went through a public bidding process through the city of Toledo.
So
We
what
worked
are you marking up the 15% for?
We work directly for the city of Toledo.
He's not marking up at 15%.
Trenchline is?
Trenchline.
They're marking up 15% of their labor?
Mm-hmm. I had the same reaction, Council President. I can assure you of that.
Well, my husband's a contractor.
Yeah.
Maybe not this type of contracting, but
All I know is I'm going to start doing
I,
I told you my rate is 100 an hour, but let's make it 150.
But
wow, that's all I've got to say. I think it's,
I'm glad we can joke about it now, because I was.
I'm not joking. I don't think it's
Oh,
joking.
no,
I'm not
I know
happy
this
about it.
look, Brian. No, that's not.
I'm not joking.
That's the polite.
Joking helps me
This is
process
gouging the
anger.
city for $30,000 that I think they didn't already have coming because we're in a jam.
If I could explain a little bit more,
Please.
so it's a prevailing wage rate job, and those are the rates that you're seeing there to the employees. And then there's the company markup on top of that. So that's so they're not making money out of the prevailing wage rates.
So that's what they're saying is that's what their payroll was, and they're gonna mark up their payroll 15%. And these other things are their costs, and they're marking them up only 15% then. So that's what these are their costs, not not the end, and they only mark up their costs 15%.
Which costs? Sorry.
So-
And on the back, the labor. So you're saying the prevailing wage is $78,689.60, and you're saying they're only marking it at 15% for what they're paying out.
yes, so on the front page, Council President, there's the labor section.
Yeah.
And each individual title has the unit price, and the unit price is the prevailing wage for that role.
I
So,
understand that.
yeah, so the 78,689 is those total costs from that table added up. And then the 15% markup is, to your question, that's the percentage that they're marking it up.
Okay.
All right, Counselor Kaufman. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so I understand that more. So it does help, because if that's just their costs and they're marking up their costs, I think it's just the way they present it is weird.
I agree with you.
That's what it is, the way they present it is like, this is crazy, you're asking for somebody to nitpick you.
And Council President, as I mentioned, I had the same reaction. I asked the same, Chris will tell you, I asked the same question you did with the same tone of voice, because I had the same reaction. My first
Either
thought,
when you have your tone of voice, they look at her like, it's just nothing.
my first thought was, why do you get to mark up labor 15%? And when he explained to me that the entirety of that dollar amount is what goes to the employee, and then the company's markup is
15% isn't even covering their taxes then.
right.
There, if I could add though, there
Please.
is the equipment section, which is not a prevailing wage rate, which is mostly, that's
And it's also,
mostly profit, fuel and whatnot goes
Yeah.
into that, but, that can be looked at as, their profit as well.
well, I mean, if we're talking about their costs and then they're tacking 15% onto their base bottom cost, like what it's gonna cost, then this is understandable. But normally when you look at these, that's not what you're looking at. They have a price set that they charge for that, and then they give that to you and you're like, okay, this is what it is. Not, here's a markup percent. So it's just very, I've never seen it presented this way before. But I'm glad for that. I think you answered my questions and I'm okay.
Great.
You go to get your car fixed and they tell you what the hourly rate is gonna be, but they don't tell you what they're paying their mechanics,
No,
right?
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
So I appreciate you asking the question, and that made a lot more sense to me too.
I just had a question about history. Could the 22 and 18-inch overlay be there to take the swoop out of the road so the semis didn't tip over into the slough when we had the mill out there? Remember, it used to go down and it went the wrong way?
Yeah, yes and no. From everything I've read about, the heavily traveled roads that are overweighted vehicles, they're, up to 18 inches, they say in some places. This is an extensive 18 to 24 inches on average. It's overkill.
That's what I mean,
But
they took the,
There's possibility that, for the old mill that was down there, maybe at one point in time, they did do a couple overlays or make it extra thick. This is still
Significantly beyond. So some of it may be, Counselor, but not to the full extent that it turned out.
The umpires over there, they did one out.
That's a new one, even for you.
Found it, figured it out, we're good.
We did a water line repair about 14th place, and we did it. I think it ended up being 17 inches where we did have to cut through, but we did not at that juncture, foresee that being a standard for a future project.
Is there any way to go to the county for this? After the project,
I reached out to the county. Kelly Foley was much obliged to give me as much information as he could, and he was a bit shocked, but
it is their road.
yeah,
And Counselor,
it was news to him also.
Counselor Sylvia, your question about the county did spark, I just wanted the council to know, and we have not received an answer yet, but I did reach out to the governor's office and explain what the project is, how the cost overrun has come up. And I reminded them that this project is primarily to upsize a water line to serve a affordable housing project, which we know is a priority for the governor. And I just asked, we received this Business Oregon grant, but we've now been presented with increased costs. Are there any additional Business Oregon funds or any other state funds available that might help fund it? So I'll be happy to update council once I have an update on that. But the thought of, is there other outlets that might help us with this has has occurred to us. I don't know if the county is going to be an option, but I have looked into are there available funds that might be able to help us.
Eric?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a number of questions. I apologize in advance. I might go on a tiny bit of length, but there's like a parlor game in government bidding, right? Like bid low, change order, change order, change order, change order, and it's painful, right? And they're hard to manage, and it's really challenging. I have a ton of heartburn on this one. Like when you look at a 40% project increase, this isn't a change order. This is a contingency that's happening after the bid, particularly structured as a time and materials contract. And so that's why I had a lot of curiosity about what does the contract say. I can concede that 24 inches is outside of what we would reasonably expect the pavement depth to be. But I also don't think that the fact that the contract is silent on 4 to 6 inches being a standard is permission for them to bring us a change order because they see something that's not 4 to 6 inches. That's not like a national industry standard. There's no statute that says bids will be submitted based on an assumed pavement depth of 4 to 6 inches. So they bid a linear foot rate based on what they saw. Now, we could have and should have had our engineering firm potholing as part of the design process, so we would be able to give people more information when they bid. I'm a little bit curious if anybody in the walkthrough had any questions about pavement depth, if there was anybody who requested the ability to pothole or do any assessments before they submitted bids. But again, maybe there's some of this that's on us, maybe, but they bid a linear foot. I mean, the language in the contract, contractor has visited the site, conducted a thorough visual examination of the site and adjacent areas, and become familiar with the general, local, and site conditions that may affect costs, progress, and performance of the work. Then 6 lists a series of items that they had at their fingertips, a 293-page specification document to look at, access to the site. 7 says, based on the information and observations referred to in the preceding paragraph, contractor agrees that no further examination, investigations, explorations, tests, studies, or data are necessary for the performance of the work at the contract price. Ooh. Like, I have nothing to change here. Like this, the contractor would like me to vote on a change, but I don't have anything in the contract to change.
So unforeseen costs. That's what it's based on. It's unforeseen costs, extra time, and equipment. I get it. Believe me, if there's anybody who was shocked, it was me. And I seriously,
No, I totally
like I
get it.
said, I want to curl in a ball.
Yeah, no.
I understand where you're coming from, but the point being is to move forward with this, there's got to be some kind of give, one way or another. And yes, it wants to be amicable. And 229 or 225, what that was, that 226. That's quite the sticker shock, and I thought it was quite unreasonable.
I mean, what is it, 1,500 utility account holders or something? It's not hard to split those costs across our utility, amortized over some capitalized amount of time. But it's like a non-de minimis impact to our residential ratepayers. And that's again, Brian, I appreciate what you said. This is a terrible position to be in. They have equipment mobbed. Like, if the longer we have that sit, the more they're going to sue us for. The longer we're in litigation. I mean, it's a really bad situation to be where we are right now. And I agree with you that we need to have a way out of it. And again, I started this by saying, I don't think that 24 inches is a reasonable. That surprised us all. Although this is not a surprise order, 10-inch order. And so I don't mind that we move a little bit that direction. But they bid a linear foot number, and based on this contract, they can deliver. I mean, we could go into executive session and talk about the extent to which it makes sense to want to litigate that. And I won't share my opinions on that at this moment in time. But I don't I'm happy to talk about it again next week with a more reasonable number. I also think, why would we have a time and materials contract now when we know what the depth is? So we're like, they're asking us to enter into, again, just basically a time and materials contingency on a low bid contract with now known information. Like, we know that the pavement's between 18 and 24 inches. So so now tell us what the linear foot cost is.
Chris will touch on that then.
So it is a discovery. They did come out in the pothole and they did find there is a discovery on site. It will lead to more work for them. If
Not more work than was described in the contract or the bid documents, like that's what I'm getting at. Like, I agree that this is more work than they anticipated. Clearly, that's the case. The question to the council, I think, is this more work than we represented? And that's, again, that's why I was, with as much time as I had, trying to go through the 293 pages of the specification, because that's the question that I was trying to answer. Is this more work than the city of Toledo represented?
Yes, I believe it is more work than the city has. There's standard details for the city of construction standards that show nowhere in the city should there be this thick of a road.
But that was never even addressed.
Was that
the
part of-
thickness
yeah.
was never addressed
Was that
by
part?
us or them.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's exactly, Councilor Mix, that's exactly my point. Like, not should we reasonably assume pavement depths across the city, but in the information that we provided for people to bid on the project, did we represent that any depth of pavement?
So you're asking if there is, because it wasn't stated specifically that it doesn't need to be addressed because there's more work. I guess I'm a little confused by the question. The way I kind of see it is there's an amount of work that, how to put this, just, you can't take an unknown and make it, we can't state all of the possible unknowns that possibly could be out there that add up to more work and say that, oh, well, it's not in the scope of work. Say, for instance, we need you to install a swimming pool and there's a huge block of concrete where the swimming pool needs to go. But that's extra work to take that out. I don't know how to explain it.
Are you?
I'll pause for a while.
Go ahead.
My question is partially for Eric, because I think you've got more knowledge of the contract, I think, than I do. I haven't read it freshly or anything, but does the contract discuss methods? So saw cutting, for instance. So when we think about like the reasonableness aspect, if the method of removing the pavement was stated in any of the documents and any of the preparation and any of the contract, et cetera, if the saw cutting is only capable of a certain depth, then the possibility to execute using that method.
I don't believe that
Yeah.
our bid documents specified a mechanism by which to do the project.
Nor when they were bidding on it, they weren't saying what process they were going to use or anything like
So
that.
one of the questions that I had for staff
Yeah.
was did none of the bids, clearly we had differentiation in bid amounts by linear foot, where some of the contractors assuming that they might bump into something that's, less than ideal. And what did that, and that's, because here's the thing, the next thing that's gonna come is change order number 4, which is that we now have more overlayment than we anticipated, because we need to go to the 24-inch depth, or else we're gonna have aggregate, it's not gonna get compacted, it's gonna sink, and then we're gonna be suing them, 2 or 3 years from now anyway. I mean, this is, so that's my concern here is that we've got a low bid contractor that's climbed back to where they probably should have bid the job. Which I do think, like, just as a side note, there are other bidding alternatives that we might want to look. I mean, we can ask for proposals and we can score those proposals based on a number of factors, cost being one of them. So for future projects, there might be ways that give us a little bit more flexibility, but
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to disparage the contractor. I know nothing about this contractor. I'm working only off of this request, which I think is unreasonable outside the contract.
Just to throw this out here too, there's a potential that we have to reimburse up to $3,000 a day for non-work. Just so you know.
Well,
That's
correct?
66 days at the rate that they're asking us to pay, I think.
here's the problem. In my construction, I did saw cutting, and we'd cut and we'd make another cut, and then we'd use a backhoe and scoop it out, and then we'd make more cuts deeper. Why can't they double cut this instead of charging us out the ass?
So the saw cutting sub is itemized out in their bid. I believe it was the subcontractor number for the saw cutting portion, which
Answer the question.
I was gonna say, Chris, the question was not the cost of it. What Counselor Key, or excuse me, I did it again.
You did it again, we're both bald, but come on.
And the funny thing is, I do that to Pace and Lapop all the time. I call one the fire chief and the other one the police chief. What Counselor Sylvia was asking was, why can't they cut down 20 feet, pull that off?
20 feet?
20 inches, thank you.
Make it a T.
It will, here's your cut, here's your cut,
Yes.
pull out this 20 inches, and then now cut down the remaining 4.
We did that all the time, because I did commercial buildings up in Idaho, all steel buildings, and we did double cuts to where, and you're talking about using a jackhammer that's gonna take many hours as opposed to using a front end loader and scooping out the asphalt, getting back in there with your machine and cutting again, and then scooping out, and there you are in your gravel, and that takes out a shitload of
They could
work.
do the final 4 inches with a steel cutoff saw. And it
I
would
know, I
take
do.
them
Spit out
8
that
hours.
work.
Yeah, 4 inches, yeah.
A hand saw of that nature, what you're talking, they're the professionals, he's a professional. I'd assume that the most efficient way possible is being dealt with, is being delivered. And the alternative, I'd like to think that, because I'm not the one who's doing the extensive work. So just keep that in mind. We've got great ideas and stuff. I don't want to speak from my wazoo. That's all I gotta say. I want to see this happen, but I want it to be, it's gotta be efficient, it's gotta be effective.
and Councilor Sylvia, you're correct that, double cutting is definitely efficient. We discussed that with Chris Stoddard about this and moving forward with this work. And that's all part of the, the time and materials and tracking time for that extra work, and that's outside of the,
$226,000 to double cut.
I don't think it's gonna be half that.
Well,
And bear in mind, the document that you have in front of you, your point, Council President, reminded me of something else. So I'm going to say this and then that. That was a weird sentence. The proposal in front of you did not account for double cutting. It was 20 inches down cutting and then jackhammer or other. So when you said 226 to double cut, that's not what was proposed. The other item that your comment made me think of was, I mentioned earlier, we brought it to you tonight asking for the authority for the full amount so that we don't have to come back again. To Councilmember Chambers' point a moment ago about, a more, I think your words were more reasonable amount. One of the scenarios that Chris suggested as an alternative, depending on how the discussion went this evening, was we set a not to exceed amount of a lower rate. I think one figure you threw out was $100,000. And then, but if we get to that amount and it looks like it's going to be anything more than an additional 25 on top of that, we come back and do this exercise again. But I mentioned that as an alternative for council in your deliberations is you absolutely can do what Councilmember Chambers suggested. You can set a lower rate as your not to exceed amount.
I don't think that's what he's suggesting.
no, yeah, I don't think the council should approve $250,000 on contingency at a 40% project cost. Like, I'll be clear about that. So sure, a lesser number is better than a larger number. What I was trying to say is, I don't think that this is a change to the contract. This was unanticipated, it's a surprise. I don't mind theoretically the city owning some of that surprise, right? But the contractor gave us a linear foot cost based on the project. The contractor signed a document that said he didn't need any further examinations, investigations, explorations, tests, studies, or data necessary to perform the work at the contract price.
Sounds like they did those things and weren't happy about it.
And well, yeah, and that's, and I mean, that's why I was asking about, like, during the walkthrough, was pavement depth discussed? Did they ask if they could pothole beforehand? Again, I think we should have potholed as part of the design. Note for future, like, we've got a big project, let's set that up. But my point is that they have skin in this game too. And so if it takes a week or a couple days, I'll come back on Friday, like, if it takes a couple days to work out an amicable shared responsibility for this surprise, that might be something I could vote on. But, like, short of that, I have no interest in paying the contractor for this surprise. Based on the contract that they signed.
And I certainly start to wonder too, recognizing the low bid process that was used, that do we have bidders that would have been more comprehensive in their contracting, like in the contract itself, right? Or in their approach to make sure that these types of concerns or possibilities were covered by the contract and the costs reflected that. So if you have a higher bid that comes in much lower than this total bid ends up being, or this total project with its 3 to 4 to however many changes we end up doing, maybe one of those bidders that we priced out of this project considered those factors, or at least kind of accepted the possibility that some of these contingencies might arise.
So I might add, excuse me, cities use trench line excavation in the past, and there's been no hiccups. It's been a good amicable working relationship. So there was no foreseeable hiccups prior to this. That being said, yeah, moving forward, if we're gonna be doing any form of pot or any kind of work on Sturtevant that has to do with our utilities, there will be potholing. I can guarantee flipping to you that, because this has been a rude awakening.
Yeah.
But we didn't take into consideration partially, I'll say we as in me, considering it's a county road. So my mind does not go there, but for future, absolutely will.
So fair to say, based on what you just said, one of the things that's making me rethink a little bit is, if Trenchline has done some work for us in the past, perhaps part of their expectations and some of our expectations were based on their previous work in our city or nearby. So
There were no red flags.
But no, yeah, you are absolutely right, and that's why, like, their expectations are irrelevant. Like,
Right.
like that,
Yeah.
like as far as like,
contract is a contract. Yeah.
well,
It's the contract
they
language.
bid the job based on assumptions that they
I
made,
agree.
and they had access to discover whatever they would like to discover about the project, and that's my concern here. It's like I am happy, Brian, to hear that we've had a good track record with them. That gives me more confidence that this is a contractor that can deliver a project.
And Chris, I believe this is the case, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong, but the contract that they signed and Councilmember Chambers has quoted, that's a Civil West contract template that if a different company, a different bidder had been the low bid, we would have used the same contract with
Yes,
them, correct?
yeah, it was in the
Okay.
bid documents, and regardless of whoever would have won this contract, we would still be in the same position that we are. In my experience, every contractor put in this position would be coming to the city with a request for information on how to proceed.
And I think that the section that you quoted, Councilor Chambers, is very obviously applicable to the circumstances. So that's really council's deliberation. Is as Chris said, if with any of the bidders that you saw on the list from the September, and they ranged everywhere from 556, 670, 88 for trench line, as high as $1,147,689.90 for Lasky Clifton. So the low bid process is pretty standard. And any contractor foreseeably, if they were faced with this circumstance, would come and ask for a change order. So then the question for council's deliberation is, to your point, how much bend do we want to have? Do we want to try to enforce the exact language that you've quoted? Do we want to your point, try to say that, there's culpability on both sides for not anticipating this, and how do we, so that's up to you guys. You give us direction on how you want us to proceed. But I agree with Chris. In my experience with public bidding projects, whether the project was 556 or 1.15 million, they're still going to come and say that.
But I just totally disagree with that. Like, the contractor that did 1.15 million was anticipating a higher linear foot cost to perform the work, right? Why were they anticipating a higher linear foot cost to perform the work?
We'd have to go back to the contract, but it was double, so it's not just the linear footage, it was overall.
Sure, but my point is that again, where I started, there is a parlor game in local government to bid a contract low and change order it back up to the appropriate cost for the project. And it's an end run on public bidding. It's a terrible way to, it's why, Rich, you said low bid contracting is standard. It is a standard way of bidding projects, but it's not the only standard way of bidding projects. And I have a particular aversion to it for instances just like this, but I don't think it's a safe assumption to say that the 1.15 million bid that was over twice as much as the low bid would have come back to us with a change order because they didn't anticipate the pavement depth.
I start to get a lot less comfortable with the markup. That feels like giving the company a little bit extra for not anticipating the challenges. I don't, like, if we were to even be thinking about just like some of the reasonableness aspect of it, if you didn't prepare for this, if you weren't anticipating the possibilities of these two types of things, I feel comfortable paying for the labor and the equipment necessary to meet the surprise. But a 15% markup to the company that didn't anticipate, that feels to me like extra.
It's a couple points that got brought up. I just want to clarify a couple. So Lasky Clifton, I worked with them quite thoroughly on multiple projects, and they would definitely have presented a change order for this 100% request, and probably tried to even go more than what Trenchline, who we have, the city has had a great reputation with for the past, I believe my first project was on Amon Road back in 2016. We worked with them. So we've had great relationships with them in the past. The other point about the 15% markup that you have some valid concerns about. When I say it's standard practice, across the industry, contractors are in the business to make money. We live in a capitalistic society. That's just the way the world works. Unfortunately, that's how the contract is structured for contractors to make money on projects. We're not trying to run them into the ground on these issues that come up. We want them to stay alive and be able to feed their families. The third point about rejection of this change order is there is definite case law and valid arguments that the contractor will have, and there will be a subsequent claim more potentially higher than the change.
That feels like you're threatening us.
He's putting, it's how the system.
It could end up costing us more.
That's
It
the
could.
I was gonna say, bear in mind, Chris this Chris is from our contracted engineering firm. He is not the contractor.
I understand.
So the statement that he's making, I believe, is, as the mayor said, he's telling you what could happen. I don't believe that if and I don't, I've never met Chris Stoddard, so I want to be very clear that I'm not saying he would. But if he was sitting in that chair saying, if you don't approve this, then I'm going to sue you, that's a threat.
Yeah.
From our consultant, that is, this is what could happen next. It's just a statement of, here's the options. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Chris, I wanted to ask you, because we talked about the difference between trench line and Lasky Clifton, and feel free to tell me that you don't, because I'm kind of putting you on the spot. This isn't something I asked you ahead of time, but do you have any recollection of what the difference in cost between the two was? What the explanation for how one was 556 and one was 1.15? Because, you know, to the counselor's point, they bid the bid was for linear feet, and the prevailing wage obviously doesn't change. So the difference in cost to me would be materials and equipment. And so that likely, my thought would be, you know, rates from subcontractors and that kind of a thing. Do you have any recollection of what the difference in cost was?
So there's a couple things that play into effect for prevailing wage. It's distance from the job to their home office also plays into effect. Lasky Clifton's based out of Florence, and I believe Trenchline is based out of Corvallis. So that could play effect into the prevailing wage rates.
All the transportation costs.
And another thing is how many subcontractors they're hiring. You know,
Markup on material too.
yeah, and I'm not sure where they're getting their materials or if they got equal unit rates from road and driveway for the asphalt. There's a lot of different factors at play. Lasky Clifton has done work in Toledo. They just worked on the Port of Toledo project.
Sewer tie-in.
The sewer tie-in.
How many change orders were there?
Oh, we were not the engineer for that project.
You're joking. No, hold on. Originally, you were not the engineer, but what did you guys end up being?
Yeah, we ended up being the engineer for that project. The engineer got unfortunately for that project, and that project ended up letting go Lasky Clifton halfway through, and I believe they're going out to bid to finish the project again because they
never
disagreed. Yeah, they disagreed on some the contract language and how the contract was written, and got to an impasse. And there's going to be some subsequent claims happening with that project, unfortunately. But we're working with the port, trying to get them through that. I'm not affiliated with the project anymore. I was a little bit in the beginning. Anyways, that's a tangent. Sorry to.
No worries. Mr. Mayor?
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
I was wondering, for expediency and to get the project moving, can we take this approximate $115,000 smack against the head?
That
Forward.
That is an option for the council has, is to approve a change order at a lower rate. That's up to your deliberations.
We need the project done. It'd be better to get it done than to go to court. I don't care that Eric's right with the wording of the contract. Sorry, you signed it. Eric's right. Just from what he read. But maybe we should give a little bit, take the whack in the head. Just to get it done.
And recognizing that a chunk of it might be coming out of that grant anyway.
Yeah, it's like,
Essentially, it's
but
all
from
gonna
now
be
on,
paid
we
for.
definitely need to pay more attention.
Well,
There will be some out of pocket from the city because to get the grant, I'll throw this out there, there was supposed to be a traffic study, which we've already floated, and then there will also be some sewer lining taking place. So there will be costs incurred from the city, but to throw that out there also is part of our I&I improvement plan.
right.
Well, I know that it's all, we have all that grant money, but it's still not a reason to be looked as a patsy and be getting taken for money from a contractor.
I don't know that that's what's going on.
No, but
Their
if you give
reputation in
in,
the past.
what I'm saying is if you give in to people, you're automatically gonna look at it as an easy mark for the next
Well,
contract.
I disagree with that.
And
Here's why. So I will
We got so
say
many
my
watchdogs.
history with Lasky, okay? My history with Lasky is they overbid anything that's outside of Lane County.
Mhm.
Okay? If there's a bid anywhere in this county, it is every time higher than anybody else that's on the bid. They might be the only bidder, which may be why the port ended up with them, okay? But that's the history that I know of. And I don't blame them, don't get me wrong. I mean, you gotta mobilize up here, you gotta bring your guys up here, I get all that. So I don't hold TLX as a nefarious entity in this. What I do hold as nefarious is the idea of, well, we won't go over this, but we're already gonna go over this. You follow what I'm saying? We already want to go over the contract, so that's why we need the change orders. And even though we're telling you, well, we won't go over this and we don't anticipate to go over this, in my experience, they do anyway. Okay? I agree with Eric that we're gonna have to clean up how we do bids. We're gonna have to figure out how to, whether that is, like you said, for Sturtevant Road, we potholed every stupid time. Okay? Whether we do that, or some other language that gets put in there so that when the contractor says, this is what I'm gonna do it for, that's what they're gonna do it for. Okay, I'm not sure how that's gonna work. Maybe that's where all that experience you have with change orders comes in. Because we're caught between a rock and a hard place here. Okay, we got to get this project done. And I am still irritated that it's taken this long. And Diane and Rich both know that because we had that discussion. We can't afford to wait because the summer building season will go away and now that project will be stuck again. If we fight it, go to court, and then have to go back out for bids. We're caught between a rock and a hard place. And so this would be my recommendation. You guys can take it or leave it, I don't care. That's why I've been sitting over with my head down, I've been trying to wheedle through this. I say we authorize 115 more, and if they want a dime more, we have to go into negotiations, not just a change order. In other words, this is what we can give you for doing the extra however many inches it is. Because as we've heard, you can cut down 18, 20 inches already with the cuts. I like the backhoe idea. I mean, I'm sorry, I think once you're down that far, you don't have to be that precise. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that, but you're dropping 20 inches. And down below that, I mean, most roads, as we've stated, are here. Okay? And disturbing this down here for a few inches doesn't super matter up here unless you're hauling big trucks. I don't see big trucks going up and down that place because I can tell you now, at least as far as all my 20 years of conversation on the Stedco property, the old mill site, they're not gonna have a lot of trucks out there, especially now that Cascade West lumber is out of business. Because that's the only heavy trucks that went out there.
We got log trucks coming off the hillside too.
Yep.
Okay, but how many and for how long? Thank you. That's very good. It's not like it was when it was a mill and things were running all the time. I would be happy to hear your thoughts on this and how it should work, but we got to get this damn thing done and we can't delay it any longer. That's my biggest issue. I think that in some way, and from everything I know about TLX, they've done this great work, always have, okay? But this is a bit much, okay? This is a 40% increase. What?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to mention on the record really quick, we have a virtual meeting attendee who has their hand up. I just wanted to state on the record, we did not include public comment as part of this meeting because it's not a regular meeting.
Right.
This is a council discussion meeting, so we won't be taking public comment this
All
evening.
right, thank you. So anyone else have ideas?
Well, 20% of the first bid is around $110,000.
That's why I said 150.
40%.
That's why I said 150.
Make them about 40% is outrageous, but that's just.
I don't have a particular problem with 115, but I do wonder a little bit to, I think, Eric's point about meeting us at least closer to the middle, if not somewhere in the middle. I start to come back a little bit to the markup rate and wonder if there is a possibility to ask for some leeway on the markup for the work associated with this change order. Not the base work or anything like that, but to say, hey, you know what, we've got this contract that very clearly states that, I'm sorry, you didn't anticipate that. Our contract doesn't say that you get to come back to us for something. 15%, asking for that to be brought down to even 10% or something like that for the work related to this change order, and then to put a cap at something like 110 or 115 is something that feels better to me, because that feels like it's a sort of shared responsibility, at least, to say, hey, you don't get to mark up. If you're telling us what your costs are going to be, and hey, great, wonderful. We just talked about how wonderful it is that they showed us their transparency on their costs and what they actually mark up to make their profits on the work. So you're showing us something that we can negotiate on.
Can I interject just one thing there?
That number, real quick, that number is $7,800 as opposed to 11,000.
What number?
10%
Oh, okay.
instead of 15.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I would not disagree with that, except they're not gonna be able to do that on the labor costs. They're not even marking it up enough to cover their taxes. The employment taxes on it.
I think that's their total labor cost marked up for profit. So I think the taxes and stuff is included in the baseline labor cost. And then they're marking up profit.
Oh, well,
The
carry
unit
on.
price is covering all of that, right?
And I'm also not asking for them to bring down their markup on their original bid, on their original work. It's really just only on the work that is associated with this change order.
I'd rather work with a best case scenario than a worst case scenario any day, just throwing it out there. We do need to move forward. I can appreciate what Councilor Chambers and Councilor Keating are pointing out, but it's a rock in a freaking hard place. And what's the amicable solution and path forward?
Especially since the parts are sitting by the side of the road.
What's that?
Especially since there's parts sitting by the side of the road, waiting. Oh, yeah, aren't they dirty?
I also would,
Oh, go ahead.
I also would recommend that as well. I think, a 115 is a
Kick in the head.
it's still a kick in the head, and I believe with our diligence of watching the work and after every day meeting with the contractor and making sure validating our numbers to the actual work that was completed that is applicable to this extra depth work, we can cut that number down even more.
So just to clarify, because I think we're onto something here, but I'm trying to understand it. So one is to limit the amount that we're authorizing the change order to 115. Two is to not authorize in the change order a markup, a contractor markup on any of the costs. Now, that's gonna have to be a negotiated element, right? So there's a chance that Rich is calling us back in a couple days, which I'm okay with, but I just wanna clarify that I think what I'm hearing is a desire for us to negotiate that the contractor not take a markup on the change order.
And we could present that to the contractor. They'll point back to the contract and say it's.
Well, then we can go back to the
Going back to the
contract.
contract.
I was just gonna say, yeah.
So we get, yeah, exactly.
But here we go again.
And I'll say, I think my desire is, I'd be interested in at least having, Rich reach out to the contractor or have Civil West, whoever needs to do the reaching out on, unclear on that. Whoever needs to reach out to find out if that can be negotiated. And I think well, I'm happy to come back tomorrow. I'm happy, like, if this justifies an emergency meeting, to get the ball rolling fast. So I think, how much does it hurt us to take an extra day or an extra 2 days
A lot.
to
How does it hurt us a lot? It doesn't hurt us.
simply ask the question of whether or not there's some wiggle room on that,
So let me mention this in response to Counselor Keating's suggestion. And I'm really open to council's thought on this. This genuinely is an open-ended question. If you kind of feel down the road that Counselor Keating was just describing, you have two options as council. You can table the matter and direct me to reach out to the contractor and ask about, what is negotiable, or you have the option to pass a motion that you've kind of been somewhat discussing, which is a reduced not to exceed amount, and there's some question about what level, if any, of markup are you comfortable with on the additional work. And so I can either go to the contractor and say, well, council's asked me to negotiate, or I can go to the contractor and say, this is what council's authorized me to do. And really, I would be interested in your thoughts on what you feel is a better position for the city to take in that approach. Either this is what I can do, or they've asked me to negotiate and reconvene in a day or two and give them a report.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Which is the most comfortable position for you to be in?
I'll be very honest with you. I'm open.
You don't?
Of course I am. Honestly, I'm fine. I'm fine taking either approach. And it's not a position that it puts me in any level of uncomfort, because the worst thing that they can say is, we're not amenable to that. What you've been authorized to offer. And at that point, then we come back and say, do you want to change your motion? The other option we have at that point is two options that we would have at that point if they're not comfortable with what I come back to them, what you authorize. The two options would be point to the wording that Councillor Chambers has pointed to and say, okay, then we're really going to lay the hammer down, or we cancel the contract and we go out for rebid. So at that point, I'm fine taking either position, coming back to you and saying either we have a deal or we don't, and you give me direction at that point. You've all expressed, or most of you have, the importance of the project.
Yeah.
But we also need to look out for the best interest of the city's financial dollars as well. So I'll give you the options and at that point. But honestly, I appreciate you asking, Council President, but I am happy to take your direction on this one.
I think
No,
Jackie said.
I thought you said.
Tracy.
Oh, I was going to say something, yeah.
Yeah.
So as I'm sitting here, I don't like the change order, but here, we're coming back to this, I understand that there is going to be some more expense for the contractor that they did not anticipate. While I don't like the change order, I would personally feel comfortable with Rich reaching out to them and negotiating this down a little bit, say, hey, this is what the council's thinking and this is what they're thinking. What are you looking at? And then he can come to back to us. I think I'm okay at the same time with approving $115,000 Number one, they came in the lowest and by quite a lot. By quite a lot. And we've had a good relationship with this company. And I get what Eric's saying, and my first knee-jerk reaction is like, no, you already have signed a contract, do it. If it was me, maybe in a personal thing that I was doing, I would say that. If it was my house and somebody did this to me, I'd be, no, not gonna happen. But I think we have to consider the relationship that the city has had with this contractor, where their bidding came in, and the fact that we need to get this done. So I do think that we are, like Eric said, we're gonna have to meet him in the middle somewhere probably. And I think 115,000 is meeting them in the middle. I think I would even be comfortable with excluding the language about getting rid of the 15% markup. Because I think that not exceeding the 115,000 may also, but I'm not opposed to it terribly either. So I think that we each need to kind of figure out where we think we're going. Maybe Rod can keep a little toll and,
I will.
and then, so I'll quit talking now.
If I can add very quickly, just to the council president's point, and not that it factors into your deliberation at all, but I've heard 115,000 as a possible midpoint. And council president pointed out that the contractor was by far the lowest bid. Taking the calculated bid, the contracted amount 556, 670, 88, even if we did add 115,000 to it, they would still be below the second lowest bid at that point, just for your information. 689, 48, and 50 cents. So if we added 115,000 to the contracted amount, that would be 671, 670, 88. So still about 16,000 under that second.
Jackie?
I don't care what they do with the amount we pay them. If they wanna say that it's 40% of that and 40% of that and 2% of that, and I could give a shit. We need to come up with an amount and not how they spend it or how they charged us.
So for the sake of some clarification, one of the things that I think is important for us to recognize is that whether we say 225,000 or 115,000, they're only going to be charging us for what they do.
Exactly, and
So-
we've got babysitters.
So part of, I think, my concern here is, and why I think to some extent, yes, 115 is where I feel comfortable capping to some extent, but I also think that to a lot of the conversation we've been having around the comfort around the lack of anticipation of this challenge and kind of co-owning between us and the contractor, the surprise of this. Just because we lower the cap does not actually put any of the responsibility on them for not anticipating this, especially if what we're hearing from Civic West is that he's anticipating this to come in closer to 100,000 regardless. So when we lower the cap from 225 to 115, we're basically authorizing 225. It's a non-factor, like it's not really a difference, because at the end of the day, with the watchdogs, with them saying, we're just anticipating the worst case scenario, but they're going to watch and their anticipation is it's going to come in closer to 100,000. I just wanted to kind of emphasize that all we're really doing is putting some cushion way above, and when we bring it down to 115, all we're doing is reducing the amount of cushion from what is anticipated as an additional cost. So I think that's just a really important, like, clarifying thing here, is that if we're sitting up here for an hour and 15 minutes in this special meeting, and we're ultimately feeling like really thrown by the surprise of this, just bringing down the number to still kind of 15,000 above what our consultant has told us he roughly anticipates this costing was just us spending an hour and 15 minutes sort of not really holding the contractor to task for not anticipating this or building it into the contract.
But it's not our job to approve cushion on contracts.
Right, no, I agree, and I just kind of wanted to emphasize that I think still to what my personal interest is here. I would like to ask Rich to at least go to the contractor and say, can you own some of this?
Jackie?
I think he needs to go to Rich and tell him that they do own some of this.
Yeah.
But we proceed. And honestly, limiting to 115,000 doesn't limit anybody but Rich. If the cost comes at 120, he's gonna go through all this shit again.
No.
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 Or 100 and whatever.
I have $25,000 spending authority, so if you cap me at 100 and, if you cap it at 115, then
Okay, it comes-
140 is really the
If
high.
it comes in at 150, we gotta do this shit all over
Then
again.
I'm perfectly willing to do that because
I am too.
there needs to be that, it is our job to safeguard our taxpayers' money.
Yes, and
Not
that's
just to
why I
say,
said
oh, you want more, here you
150.
go.
And the one consideration that I think I'm sure you all have thought about it, but I'm gonna say it just in case, is Counselor Kaufman's point about what if it comes in at 150? That's really the thing to keep in mind is you can say 115, right? But if it does end up being 150, once we cut into the ground, we're committed to the project. You know, one of the things that we discussed, and we can still do this, they haven't done it yet. One of the things that we've talked about is having them do, say, 100 feet, just as throwing a number out there. Time how long it takes them to do that. And then from there, we can extrapolate an estimate of how long it would take. And if that looks more like the 225 than the 115 or whatever number we come up with, then we say repave the ground and cancel the contract. I don't think anybody wants that, but that is one option. But unless we go down that route, whatever dollar amount we authorize, once we cut into the ground and start moving, we're pretty much committed to the contract. And if it does come out to 150, then by if we go into time and materials, then we're paying 150. So that's a consideration.
See, that's what I meant by the 115 really only limits Rich.
Let me,
Frank had something to say.
It does.
So going back to my questions to you earlier, you said that there's not gonna be any extra cost for the dumping and stuff of all this extra asphalt. But I'm looking at $42,000 for this dump truck. I'm looking at $21,000 for the excavator and the 308 with the breakers, another $19,000. Aren't they already gonna be on site anyways for the first bid? So they should not be marking us up 15% on that equipment for $13,000. And if they were already subcontracting, a markup of $4,000 on that one, when they were already gonna be cutting, they shouldn't be marking those up when the stuff is already on site. It wasn't brought in for the second bid, it was there for the first bid. So yeah, there's gonna be the hourly charge, understandable. But marking it up when something's already on site for the first thing, that's shady as all hell.
That's true.
I 100% agree with you, and, you know, we're in your court on this, we're gonna go to bat, and every day we're gonna be out there. The hauling doesn't make sense, the subcontractor saw cutting, they were already gonna have to cut the asphalt. We're gonna be going to bat and arguing these points every single day, and full transparency with the contractor, at the end of every day, we're gonna verify our numbers with them and be on the same page with and agree to what they're getting paid for extra that day. And those costs that are applicable to regardless of to the contract, that they should not be considered extra at all.
No, see, I'm comfortable with that 15% markup for their hourly labor because, you know, you gotta feed your family. I'm absolutely not comfortable with that other 17,000 in markups because all that equipment and stuff's already gonna be there.
And the way that we see it is by this table they're providing their rates. But the actual hours, that's for us to establish by our watching them in the field and assessing if it's actually considered extra for the contractor.
Go here.
So maybe as a suggestion, council needs to approve change orders greater than $25,000. We also have the option of authorizing the city manager to enter a change order up to a certain number. So we can send Rich with the authority to negotiate a change order on our behalf up to a number the council's comfortable with, if that's $115,000. I think we're nearly an hour and a half into this. I think you have a good idea of where our minds are on it. And I think, maybe that gives you the ability to bring home something that.
So to your point, Councilmember Chambers, it seems like there's been, and anybody on the dais can correct me if they don't agree with this statement, but it sounds like there's been some consensus around a dollar amount. So the question then really becomes, there's been some discussion around what, if any, markups council is comfortable with. And I know Councilor Kaufman has said, you know what, I don't care, but there's been some discussion amongst the rest of you about should markups apply. So what I would appreciate is direction on the overall cost and inclusion of markups. And then to Councilmember Chambers' point, then I would be happy to provide a motion that council can, potentially act on that would authorize me to, within those parameters, execute a change order without having to come back to another meeting if that's what you're comfortable with.
So I had a pitch, and really it depends a little bit on one question for I guess all three of you. Having worked with TLX in the past and having a good relationship, do you feel that if Rich contacted them tomorrow and said, council would like me to negotiate down to a 10% markup, do you think they walk away from the project, or do you think they at least continue the conversation?
I believe Chris Stoddard is a reasonable man.
Okay, so my pitch is, because again, I'm thinking about all we're doing is talking about how much cushion we're getting. My thought is, I don't want to have to come back here if the number is 150 or something like that. I trust that Civic West is going to be, it's Civic West, right? Civil West. I trust that Civil West is going to be on top of it. I trust that they're going to be standing there with stopwatches and counting the trucks, and to Frank's point, making sure that if the equipment is already there, we're not getting charged for putting it there again. I trust that. And so to some extent, I'd feel more comfortable with even a 125 or a 150 if we are authorizing that Rich go to them with the negotiation. Basically, we've approved already 150 and say a reduction of the markup rates for the work of this change order only to 10%.
If I can just remind council really quick, in addition to what Councilmember Keating just mentioned, as we discussed a moment ago, I have authority for an additional 25. So when you mention 150, that approval would technically then exceed up to 175.
And I recognize that.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of this is, all we're really talking about is cushion here.
Correct.
Right? And so I don't know whether it's 125 or something like that. I'm just saying I'm comfortable with a slightly higher amount, knowing that some diligence is going to be done by Civil West. I think that taking a day and at least going to TLX and saying, we are as surprised about this as you are, but we also think that it was both of our responsibilities to anticipate this, or at least do the diligence to make sure that we knew what we were getting into. So we're asking you to take some off of your markup, not what you're paying your people, not what the actual costs of your equipment.
You can't change what they're paying their people.
Exactly, that's right, that's kind of my point. We're not asking you to take a loss on this project. We're asking you to cut into your markup.
We're asking you to do the additional work at your cost.
Or closer to.
Or closer to it, yeah.
So I'm gonna attempt a motion, just to be clear,
Oh, Rich, what?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I've written out a motion that I would be happy to provide if that's easier for you, Counselor Chambers, or I'm happy to let you run with it.
What I think I can support. And I'm not there on the higher number. I understand exactly what you're saying. I totally get it. Trust Rich, but I really want to tighten the sideboard in part to strengthen his hand.
Yeah.
And so I move to authorize the city manager to negotiate a change order not to exceed $115,000 with the contractor.
I'll second it.
Give it to
Uh-oh, that
Jackie.
was a tie.
I am.
Give it to Jackie. Ladies first.
Are we equipping him to also negotiate on?
I think, my sense, and Rich, you correct me if you're wrong, I think you have a good sense on what the elements of the negotiation the council has at the highest priority. So I think very much their the word's escaping me.
Markup.
To make sure
Their
we're not-
markup, yes.
I just want to make sure we're not preventing him from also putting that on the table.
No, I think that's the
That's
top
why
of the
you
list.
sort of.
I think that's what
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
called.
Yeah, I think that's very much the intent, yeah.
So the only thing that I would add, or ask you to add, Counselor, just for clarity on the record, is that in addition to authorizing me to negotiate the change order,
Negotiate
is
first.
to execute.
Negotiate and execute a change order not to exceed $150,000. Is the second okay with that? Change the motion?
Resecond.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Rethird.
All right.
Rethird. Yeah, okay.
So, Paul, do you have the motion?
I believe it was to motion to negotiate and execute change order number 3 for the Sturdivant Road water line upsizing project at amount not to exceed $115,000.
You're good.
There you go. You want to take our roll call vote?
I'd be happy to. Counselor Keating,
Yes.
Counselor Sylvia,
Yes.
Council President Mix,
Yes.
Counselor Kaufman,
Yes.
Counselor Chambers,
Yes.
Mayor Cross,
Yes.
and with one absent vote, it passes 6-1. Oh,
6-0.
0-1.
There you go.
So I do, before I adjourn the meeting, I do believe that after listening to contract language and how this is played out, I think we need to look at other ways to do contracts that more, for lack of a better word, more reflect what I've always referred to as the Toledo zone, because that's how it was explained to me, would be now 29 years ago. Things just work different here. Like, who thought that was going to be a 20-inch chunk of, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? We always run into these things as we've learned over the years. And so we need to come up with ways that if we're going to have language like that, then contractors have to be able to hold accountable to it. Okay, so there needs to be, and I hate to say it, but Savani's going to have to weigh in on this. How do we do these contracts so that contractors don't do what Eric's afraid of?
Yeah. Well, and I think to Counselor Chambers' point as well, I'm going to take this as a lesson learned for the city, because you're absolutely correct, Counselor. We didn't foresee this. We didn't have any reason to foresee this, but we also very easily could have done the potholing before putting the project out to bid. Now, how that would impact the road being open at that time, but we could have looked into this. I like the Toledo zone expression, because you wouldn't expect outside the Toledo zone that you would ever need to do that. But taking that extra step is definitely, as we evaluate the process, definitely something that I appreciated council saying, we need to own part of this, because you're right. We gave no information, in the bid process that there was reason to think that it was thicker than 4 to 6. So I appreciate very much the robust discussion this evening. I know this took probably longer than any of us would have liked, but I thought you had a very, very good conversation and analysis of the situation. So thank you all for your
And
time.
thank you, Chris, for coming in
Yes.
and
Yeah,
listening to
happy-
us, work through it, and for a feisty bunch.
A lot of credit. Chris was good enough that when we found out about this, he actually met with us that day and took time away from his family to come meet with us, to try to, I would say, put our minds at ease, but to talk about a path forward and get the ball rolling. And then Mr. Hebner picked it up and ran with it, so.
And I'm just glad he brought up what he brought up, because it made me think more on certain stuff, so I really appreciated you asking all those questions in email
Always
and
happy to be a
here.
pain.
No, it's not a pain, it's helping everybody educate each other.
It is.
After the meeting. Are we good?
I'm good.
All right, we're adjourned.